Hello and welcome to the third and final part of our analysis of iCAT9, part of our All India National Level CAT test series for CAT. So in the previous two parts we saw how iCAT9 was a moderate mock with a moderate verbal section and a tough DILR section. As we said, the average LOD of questions in this mock was 1.87 or close to 1.9. What this means is that if each question was rated as 1, 2 or 3 being easy, moderate or difficult, on an average each question was just below moderate as far as the mock was concerned. Of course, this does not mean that each question actually had that LOD. There would be a mix of easy, moderate and tough questions. As we said, verbal was moderate, DILR was tougher than usual. When we come to quant, and there's some formatting here, but some formatting error here, but you can observe that quant was on the easier side with an average LOD of 1.5. Just to give you a perspective, the actual exam will have an average LOD of 1.6 to 1.65 going by the last 3 years. So not to say that this always happens. For all you know, this year quant might be tough, quant might be simpler, but we cannot say that with guarantee right now. This section was slightly simpler compared to the actual exam. Now, how do we analyze quant? Before we go into that, we first need to see that in quant, the overall pattern over the last 3 years has been pretty standard in terms of the breakup of questions. Typically, there have been anywhere between 15 to 17 easy questions, 3 to 5 tough questions, and the remaining 15 to 17 again are what can be classified as moderate questions. Now this also shows you why it is important to be reasonably good in a large number of chapters rather than being excellent in a few selected chapters. Even if you know that typically in CAT you need to attempt anywhere about 20 or 21 questions to be sure of clearing the quant cutoff. So even if you do all these questions right, you are still falling short by another 7 questions or so. Now, it is pretty likely that you might not be able to solve the tough questions. Let's assume that you do not solve the tough questions. Then very likely that you would have to solve 40 to 50% of this to be able to clear the cutoff. Now, for that to happen, you need to have strengths in a number of chapters. What do I mean by this? A lot of these moderate questions could be from different chapters in modern math, arithmetic, algebra, geometry. So if you are reasonably good at a lot of these chapters, your chances of getting 50 to 60% of these questions right increases, and that increases your chances of clearing the sectional cutoff. Let's have a look at the actual breakup of this section before we decide how many questions were to be attempted. Now, luckily in quant, as we said, the questions can be clearly divided into 4 parts: arithmetic, algebra, geometry and modern math. So you can look at each of these sections, analyze each of these areas, analyze your strengths and weaknesses, and then decide which one to attempt. However, having said that, even if somebody says that he or she is good at arithmetic, does not necessarily mean that each mock will have easy arithmetic or he'll be able to do excellently in arithmetic in each mock. That again is one more reason why you should be competent at multiple chapters. Plus, as you shall see in the analysis of each mock that has preceded this, every mock has a different structure in terms of number of questions of these areas. It has a different structure also in terms of the relative difficulty of these areas. So firstly, observe here that the sectional LOD is at exactly 1.5. Algebra is more or less at par at 1.56, so more or less it is representative of the section. Now, because arithmetic as well as geometry are relatively simpler compared to algebra here, there has to be something that really shoots up the difficulty level of the section, and that exactly is done by modern math. You can see that modern math is significantly tougher compared to the section, whereas arithmetic and algebra are somewhat easier compared to the average LOD of the section. So here, even looking at this much data tells you that the real scoring area was from arithmetic, algebra and geometry rather than from modern math. So if somebody was really banking on modern math, then that person could have been for a bit of a shock in this exam. Let's go a little deeper into this and see the breakup of each of these areas. Starting with arithmetic, firstly, observe that there were 12 questions in arithmetic, followed by 9 in algebra, so 21 so far, followed by another 7 in geometry, that's 28, and then 6 in modern math, that's 34. So again, the overall weightage to arithmetic was more, like we've seen in 2017. Now, within this, observe, there were 9 questions which could be classified as easy or sitters. Now, what are sitters? Essentially, from the point of view of the LOD, they are still classified as LOD 1. But even within easy, we've classified questions as either rank sitters, which means that you just read the question, you know what is to be done, apply the formula, you get the answer. And then there are some questions which are easy, but there are a couple of more steps involved or some application involved. But all of them are more or less doable questions. So if I look at arithmetic, 9 out of 12 questions, that's 75% of the questions, were easy to sitters. So definitely these should have been attempted. There were just 2 questions which were moderate. Also, we've got student feedback that moderate questions in arithmetic are simpler than, let's say, moderate questions in geometry or modern math. So again, the chances of attempting them go up. There was a single question which could be called tough, so you could have skipped that potentially. But if I look on the whole, this was an area which could have maximized your marks in the section. And that is where the strategy for arithmetic would have been to maximize your attempts in this particular area. Let's contrast this with algebra. Now you can observe this was a far more balanced section. Out of the 9 questions, nearly half or a little more than half were on the easier side with 3 easy and 2 sitters. So 5 out of 9, a little more than half. There was again one tough question, potentially worth skipping. You could have been selective about these 3 moderate questions. So here the combination really would have been to maximize your attempts in the easy questions and then be selective in the moderate questions. Looking at geometry, there was further similar breakup with respect to algebra. Of these 7, here the good part, and as you can see its LOD was less than algebra. Why? Because of these 7, there were 5 questions which were easy or sitters. So definitely lot of potential to attempt questions here. There was just one moderate and just one difficult question. So if you found them tough, both of them could have been skipped. But again, here the strategy could have been to maximize your attempts. So here, unlike a lot of mocks, there are 3 areas where you can maximize a lot of attempts. Compare this with modern math, which we said was the toughest area. 1 sitter and then straight away every question being moderate. So there was no easy question, no tough question, but 5 out of 6 questions were moderately difficult. And in modern math, even a moderate question can often seem difficult to people. So here the only thing was to try and identify this question and solve it. So if I look at this, this was actually one area which could have been just ignored. So now when I want to look at the overall attempts, what I see is that there were 14 sitters, which was a huge chunk because we said there are generally 15 to 17 easy questions. Whereas here only 14 of them were straight away sitters. There were 6 easy questions. So here this mock was far simpler because there were 20 easy questions instead of 15 or 16. There were 3 tough questions as expected. While the number of moderate questions actually, so I think I seem to have made a calculation error somewhere. 20 and 3 and 11. So something seems to have gone wrong. Just give me a minute. But there were, I think, yeah, there were 11 moderate questions. Sorry, this is 23. So 11. So this number dropped a bit. So here your overall number of attempts could have really shot up. Even if you did 90% of these, you would have got anywhere around 18 to 19 attempts here itself. Even if you ignored this totally and did 50% of these questions, there was still at least 6 questions that you could have tried. If you did 2/3, then this would have gone up to 7. So on the whole, if you were to ask us, I would say anywhere close to 25 or 26 attempts, even 25 would be a reasonably good performance as far as this mock is concerned. Now, as we said, there were 14 sitters. So our faculty have listed down all these sitters. As we always keep saying throughout our analysis, this is not an exhaustive list, which means that you can create your own list and find more questions that you think are sitters. This is not also an absolute list. What this means is that we might have said question 79 is a sitter, for instance, and you might feel no, it's moderate because I am weak in quadrilaterals. That's absolutely fine. But then you need to sit with your faculty and understand why this has been classified as a sitter. Is there one simple property? Had I known that, I would have done this question quickly. So that is where for each mock, you need to create your own list of sitters like this. You need to create your own list of tough questions like this and go on and try and analyze them and see whether you solved it. If yes, did you get the right answer? Whether your approach was correct. If you got the wrong answer, where did you go wrong? If you did not attempt that question, why did you not attempt it? Did you just miss it, or did you read it but did not understand? So all these questions need to be asked after every mock. Finally, we move to the last graph of this analysis. We saw this graph in both the earlier sections where we mapped the difficulty level for the test or for each question in this section. So the blue lines clearly indicate the MCQs, the pink or orange ones indicate the numerical entry questions. Now we always keep saying that there will be chunks, and this will show you the flow of questions which will indicate how the paper was structured and where you could find the easy questions. You can see that from this point around question 78 to question 100, there was a huge chunk of easy questions. If I consider 78 to 100 is 23 questions, of these I had 3 here, then another 4 here, then another 4 here and another 3 here. So the good part is that out of 23, 14 questions were easy. Also they were in chunks of 3-4 questions back to back, which means attempting them was made easier. Again, the moderate questions were in chunks, so you had to identify and potentially skip them. Here the moderate to difficult questions were in chunks, so you should have again potentially skipped or done them last. But when I look at this first half, I see that there was this one chunk here which was doable, and then a smaller chunk here of 2 questions with one single question here. But in the first half from 67 to 78, so in the first 11 questions, there were already 2 of the 3 tough questions were here itself, and there were 4 moderate questions here. So this was more, I can say more of the tougher part of the test was actually in the first half rather than the second half. So here it was more a case of question selection really, and from here onwards it was more a case of maximization of your attempts. So again, going through the entire test, seeing where the easy questions were situated was very, very important. Let's have a look at a couple of questions. Okay. Consider question 72. The circumcenter of a triangle lies outside the body of the triangle. Which of the following is a possible set of values of the sides of the triangle? Now, this is purely based on the property of circumcenters. If you know that in a right triangle, the circumcenter will lie on the hypotenuse, then you know that for an obtuse angle triangle, the circumcenter will lie outside. So that's one property that you need to know. And after that, you need to know that when I have an obtuse angle triangle, versus a right triangle, I know that in a right triangle a square plus b square is c square. In an obtuse triangle, this property changes. So my a square plus b square is not equal to c square, it becomes less than c square. So again, that property, when you use it, it becomes easier to solve the question. Consider question 100 for instance. 6 equally spaced points on the circumference of a triangle. How many triangles can be drawn using any 3 of these points? Now if these 6 are equally spaced, they will all obviously help form a hexagon because they are equally spaced from each other, and then they will be all equally spaced from the center of the circle, so you can pick up any 3 points. So essentially it becomes a case of 6c3 and you can actually find the answer. So knowing certain properties and visualizing becomes very important in order to solve these questions. On the whole, if we were to look at this section, we can say it was a fairly easy section with a lot of sitters and a lot of easy questions. It was eminently possible to try and solve at least 25 to 26 questions in this section. On the whole, if we consider the entire mock, we can say that as expected, it was a moderate verbal section with 18 to 19 good attempts. It was a difficult DILR section with 13 to 14 good attempts and an easy quant section with 25 attempts. So if we take all of these, we can say that anywhere close to 55 attempts would be a good performance as far as this mock is concerned. The analysis for all the earlier mocks are already put up on our official YouTube channel, the link for which has been given here. You can click on this link to subscribe to our channel. Also, you can receive notifications every time a new video is put up. All you need to do is click on the bell button given. Please feel free to put in your comments, feedback, or any questions on the thread below the video. Keep watching. Wish you all the very best and thank you.